The man in the breakdown lane. Mark Jeffries had been hauling freight across I-80 for almost 15 years, but that February night hit different. The Wyoming sky looked bruised, heavy with clouds that swallowed the moon. His cab heater struggled against the cold, and every few minutes he could hear the wind slap the side of his trailer hard enough to make the mirrors tremble. Mark was used to empty highways, but tonight the road felt abandoned, like even nature didn't want to be there. He kept thinking about the sign he passed an hour earlier. No services for 73 miles. A warning, almost a threat. As he rolled past the dark outline of distant hills, his CB crackled with static, then a faint voice whispered what sounded like his name. He froze, staring at the radio as the signal cut off. Out here, alone, Mark wasn't sure if the highway was calling him, or warning him. An hour later, the cold hit harder. Mark spotted a lone sedan on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly in the wind. The car looked half buried in frost. A man stood beside it, waving both arms like he'd been out there for a while. Mark slowed. Helping stranded drivers wasn't new to him, but something about the man felt wrong. The guy didn't pace, didn't shiver, didn't even look cold. He just stood there, stiff, staring straight at Mark's windshield as if he'd been waiting specifically for him. Mark rolled down the passenger window a few inches. "You need help?" he called out. The man stepped closer, but his face stayed hidden under the hood. "My family," he said quietly. "They're still inside." Mark leaned out to look. The sedan's windows were fogged, but he didn't see silhouettes. Not a single one. A shiver crawled up his spine. Mark parked behind the sedan and grabbed his flashlight. The cold sliced through him the second he stepped out. The man didn't move from his spot. He just stared at Mark with his head slightly tilted, like he was studying him. Mark walked toward the car. "Sir? If your family's in there, I need to check on them." He wiped frost from the back window and shined his beam through. Nothing. Empty seats. No bags. No signs anyone had been inside recently. He circled the vehicle. "Sir, I don't see." When he turned around, the man was suddenly right behind him. Mark jumped back so hard he hit the bumper. The hooded figure leaned in close, whispering, "They were here. You drove past them." Before Mark could respond, the man stepped backward toward the dark shoulder and seemed to fade into the wind. Mark scrambled back to his truck and locked the doors. His breath fogged the cab as he tried convincing himself that the man was just some distressed driver acting strangely from the cold. But then his CB radio flickered again. Static. A child's voice. "Dad, we're still here." Mark's blood ran cold. He hadn't spoken about children. No one should know anything. He stared at the sedan through his side mirror. The hazard lights were dead now, like the batteries suddenly gave up. Mark tried calling highway patrol, but his phone had no service. The radio cut in again. "Don't leave us on the road," the child whispered. Mark covered the mic with his hand, shaking. When he glanced back at the sedan, all its windows were now completely clear, like someone had wiped them from the inside. And in the back seat, something moved. Mark forced himself out of the cab again because he couldn't shake the feeling that something inside the car actually needed help. As he approached, he saw a small shape sitting upright in the rear seat. A kid. Pale face. Dark circles under the eyes. The child stared straight ahead, unblinking. Mark tapped the glass. "Hey, are you okay?" The kid slowly turned, and Mark's heart dropped. The eyes weren't reflecting light normally. Instead, they looked hollow, like he was staring into tunnels instead of pupils. Behind him, footsteps crunched on the ice. He turned. The hooded man was back, standing inches away. "You should have kept driving," the man whispered. Mark stumbled backward, but the man stepped closer, his face still hidden. "They don't like when someone stops." Before Mark could bolt, the sedan's door creaked open on its own. Mark sprinted back to his truck, heart slamming against his ribs as the sedan's door slowly swung wider. He climbed into the cab, fired the engine, and tore away from the shoulder so fast the trailer fishtailed. In his mirror, he saw the hooded man standing dead center in the breakdown lane, the child now at his side, holding his hand. both staring directly at Mark's truck as it sped away. Mark didn't take another job on I-80 for months. When he eventually reported the abandoned sedan, Highway Patrol said no car had been found. No footprints. No signs anyone had been there. But nights when he crosses lonely stretches of highway, his CB still crackles with that same voice. Small. Soft. Too close. Dad, why didn't you stop? The light under the overpass. Derek Mason had been driving trucks long enough to memorize every rest stop between Eureka and Crescent City, but that night the stretch of Highway 101 felt unfamiliar. Fog rolled in from the redwood forest in thick sheets, swallowing his headlights and muting the world to a dull gray. Even the usual distant ocean roar felt choked off. He checked the clock. 2:14 a.m. His delivery wasn't due until morning, so he wasn't in a rush, but the oppressive quiet made him uneasy. The road curved toward an old concrete overpass he'd crossed 100 times. Tonight, though, something glowed beneath it, a pale, milky light that didn't look like a vehicle, street lamp, or anything he recognized. Derek slowed instinctively. The fog seemed to gather tighter around the area, almost like it was hiding something. As he crept closer, the light flickered, and then stretched wider, like it knew he was coming. He pulled onto the shoulder about 30 yards from the overpass. The light didn't brighten or dim. It just hovered there, flat and unnatural, spilling across the pavement like a liquid glow. Derek rolled down his window, expecting maybe the hum of a generator or the noise of construction equipment. Nothing. Dead silence. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out. The air under the overpass felt colder than the rest of the highway, cold enough that Derek's breath clouded instantly. His boots scraped along gravel as he walked toward the light. Then he noticed something strange. The fog wasn't drifting past the overpass. It was circling it, like it was caught in a slow, deliberate spiral. His flashlight beam hit the concrete pillars, and suddenly the glowing patch vanished for half a second, exposing something moving behind one of the columns. A silhouette. Tall. Still. Watching him. Derek froze, his breath catching in the back of his throat. He pointed his flashlight at the pillar, but the beam collapsed into the fog as if the air itself was absorbing the light. The glowing patch reappeared, this time stretching further outward until it brushed the tips of his boots. He stepped back fast. The temperature dipped again. His hands started shaking, not from cold but from the heavy pressure settling on his chest. Something felt deeply wrong, like the overpass wasn't a structure anymore, but an opening. Suddenly the silhouette shifted. Not walking. Not stepping. Sliding. It slid from behind the left pillar to the right pillar without any sound. Derek's pulse slammed hard. He dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning across the wet pavement. Then a voice drifted out from under the overpass, soft, monotone, distorted. "Keep your lights on." He spun around. No one was behind him. Derek rushed back to his truck, fumbling with the door handle. His fingers were trembling too much to grip it properly. When he finally got inside, he slammed the door and locked it twice. The interior lights flickered as the fog thickened around the cab. He grabbed his radio. "Any drivers on 101 near the Klamath overpass? I've got something weird down here." Static. No voices. No background chatter. Not even a hiss. Just a dead, empty channel. He started the truck, but as soon as the engine turned over, every dashboard light lit up at once. Brake, battery, oil, check engine, like his truck was glitching out. The radio suddenly crackled. But instead of voices, he heard footsteps. Slow. Steady. Coming closer. Derek lifted his eyes to the side mirror. Through the fog, a tall shape was approaching the cab, moving with that same unnatural sliding motion. His mouth went dry. Whatever it wasn't walking. The figure stopped just outside the reach of his headlights. Fog wrapped around it like a veil, and the strange glow pulled around its feet. Derek squinted, trying to make out a face, or even limbs, but the shape didn't have clear edges. It looked like a man and a shadow had been pressed together. Then it leaned forward. The glow pulsed upward like a heartbeat. A low, distorted whisper came through his radio again. "Turn them off." His headlights flickered without him touching a thing. Panic ripped through him. He slammed the truck into gear and hit the gas, but the wheels spun uselessly on the damp shoulder. The figure slid closer, now within a few feet of his window. For the first time, Derek saw its face. Not human. Not animal. Just a smooth surface with faint impressions of where features should be. It raised one hand toward the glass, long fingers tapping gently. Derek floored the gas again, praying for traction. The wheels finally caught, jerking the truck forward. He didn't care if the trailer swayed or if he tore up the shoulder. He just needed distance. As he sped under the overpass, the glow beneath it flared bright white, swallowing his windshield for a second. The radio shrieked with static. The engine coughed. But the truck pushed through. When he cleared the bridge and looked in his mirror, the fog parted just long enough for him to see the figure standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still, head tilted slightly, like it was memorizing him. And then it wasn't there. Gone. Like it had snapped out of existence. For weeks, Derek avoided Highway 101 at night. But sometimes, when the fog creeps across the road, his radio crackles with that same distorted whisper. Keep your lights on. Every time it happens, his headlights flicker. The man in the breaker yard. Russell Clay had been driving long hauls through Texas for nearly 2 decades. On most nights, the empty highway soothed him. But that evening, as he crossed into Amarillo, he felt a strange heaviness sitting in his chest, an instinct telling him not to stop. Still, his logbook was maxed out, and DOT rules meant he had to take a mandatory break. The closest spot was a dusty breaker yard behind an old trucking service station. He'd stopped there plenty of times before, but tonight the place looked darker. The overhead lights flickered, and the wind kicked up dirt in restless swirls. Russell parked next to a line of abandoned trailers. The air felt too still, like the whole yard was holding its breath. He stepped out, stretching his legs, when he noticed a figure standing between 2 trailers, thin, motionless, and facing him. He blinked. The figure hadn't been there a second ago. Russell narrowed his eyes. The figure stood several yards away, wearing what looked like an old, torn reflective vest. But it wasn't moving. Not shifting weight. Not turning its head. Just standing there, locked in place as if waiting for something. "Hey, you all right?" Russell called out. His voice echoed too sharply in the empty yard. No answer. The wind suddenly died, and the breaker yard fell silent. Russell took a step back toward his truck, instinct waking up inside him. He climbed into the cab and locked the doors. The figure still hadn't moved. He grabbed his CB radio. "Anyone hear me? Someone's out here in the Amarillo breaker yard acting weird." Static. Then a faint crackle. No response. He looked back through the windshield. The figure was gone. Russell leaned forward, scanning the yard. Then, in his side mirror, he saw it again. Standing closer now, right beside the back of his trailer. Russell's heartbeat kicked up fast. He grabbed his flashlight and braced himself. Against his better judgment, he stepped out of the truck. He swept the light across the yard, but its beam barely cut into the darkness pooling between the trailers. "Hello?" he called again, louder this time. Something clanged inside a nearby empty trailer. Hard. Like someone slamming a steel door. Russell's skin prickled. He slowly walked toward the sound, flashlight shaking in his hand. The breaker yard smelled like old oil and wet dust, and the air carried a coldness that didn't match the Texas night. As he approached the trailer, his radio hanging off his belt crackled sharply. A low, distorted voice whispered through it. "Don't look inside." Russell froze. The trailer door was half open, swaying gently even though there was no wind. A faint shadow moved behind it. Something was waiting inside. Russell backed away, trembling. He clicked his radio. "Who is this?" No answer. Just breathing, slow, strained, unnatural breathing that didn't sound human. He hurried toward his truck again, but halfway there, he felt it. Someone was watching him. He turned around slowly. The figure in the vest now stood at the opposite end of the yard, its head tilted, its posture stiff. The reflective strips on the vest caught his flashlight beam, but where a face should have been, there was only darkness. Russell wiped sweat from his brow. This ain't real. I'm tired. I'm imagining things. But when he blinked, the figure moved. Not walked. Shifted, like a frame jump in an old video. He stumbled backward. His keys slipped from his hand and fell into the dirt. As he bent down to grab them, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, heavy, dragging. He turned. No one was there. But something exhaled right next to his ear. Russell bolted toward his truck. The footsteps behind him sped up, matching his pace even though he couldn't see anything when he glanced back. He lunged into the cab, locking the doors and starting the engine. The headlights washed over the breaker yard. The figure stood right in front of the truck. Closer than ever. Reflective vest glowing back at him. Move! Russell muttered, slamming the horn. The blast echoed across the dirt lot, but the figure didn't react. Instead, its head slowly lifted, revealing something sickening. The face wasn't missing. It was covered in a dark, matte sack, tied around the skull, no eye holes, no mouth. Just a rough stitched surface. Then, its neck cracked sharply to the side. The radio in Russell's cab screeched. The same distorted voice whispered, "He shouldn't be here." The figure took a single step forward, and the truck engine died instantly. The cab went pitch black. Russell's breath shook as he hit the ignition over and over. Nothing. Only the sound of crunching dirt, footsteps circling the truck. His headlights flickered back on for a brief second. The figure was now standing at his door. Its sack-covered head leaned slowly against the glass. Russell screamed and pounded the horn, but it only made static hiss through the radio. The figure tapped 3 times on the window. Tap. 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 Then everything went silent. When the headlights flickered again, the figure was gone. The truck roared back to life without him touching anything. Russell didn't think. He hit the gas and tore out of the breaker yard, gravel flying behind him. In the rearview mirror, he saw one last thing. The figure standing in the center of the yard, head tilted, hand raised like it was waving goodbye. A week later, a fellow trucker told him the truth. No one had worked that breaker yard in years. Not since a worker died there wearing a reflective VS.